and Napoleon actually had enough power to overthrow the entire monarchy, the entire government, and now he was in charge, and that was the start of Napoleon's reign, but also the end of the French Revolution. So now I'm going to talk about Symphony number 85. So Symphony number 85 was nicknamed La Reine, and this is the Queen in English. And it was nicknamed this because the Queen at the time, who was Marie Antoinette, loved the song so much that Haydn nicknamed it the Queen for her. So a little information about this symphony. It is the fourth of six Paris symphonies, which were composed by Haydn, and this was composed in between 1785 and 1786. The period is classical, which makes sense. Haydn was strictly classical, and the genre obviously classical. The key of the entire symphony and movement 1 was B flat major, which also makes the tonality of movement 1 major. The meter of movement 1 was duple meter because it was in common time, and the tempo was vivace, which makes sense because in 4 movements symphonies, it goes fast, slow, and so since this was the first movement, it makes sense that it was a tempo of vivace. The texture was homophonic because it had lots of chords underneath and then a nice melody over. The instrumentation, it was written for 1 flute, 2 oboes, 2 bassoons, 2 horns, and then strings. And that's usually how it's played. It was written for an orchestra. The dynamics vary between piano to forte, but it's very repetitive. We can see a common pattern that it goes from piano, and then builds its way, crescendos up to forte, and then continues that process. And then once it's at forte, it jumps down to piano, and then it builds back up to forte, and it just continues and continues. The form is, the first movement is in sonata form, which is sonata form. And yeah, that's the symphony. So after that, if I was in person, I would show you my story, The Royal Mountain, but I've sent you a link to that. And lastly, to wrap this up, we have an assessment. So who was Haydn employed by the longest? Out of the 4 possible answers, it's the Esterhazy family because he worked there for 30 years. Why did Haydn nickname Symphony number 85 the Queen? Like I said before, it's because the Queen really loved this specific symphony of the Paris symphonies, so he nicknamed it the Queen. What is Haydn considered the father of? If you remember, he was the father of symphonies and string quartets. And lastly, the last question is, what was the key of Symphony number 85? And out of the 4 possible answers there, it's B flat major. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening. Yeah.